Good afternoon. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching us on GrassRoots, today is the Aspen City Council work session for August 15th, 2022. Today on our agenda, we have board and commission interviews as well as council board reports and council updates. But with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our board and commission interviews. We have a few people online, but many people in room with us. So the first one we're going to be talking about is the Wheeler Opera House. We have Chip Fuller, who's online, and we have Madeline Osberger, who's here with us. We're going to see if we can do this together. So Madeline, if you don't mind, come on up to the table.
Hey, Chip. Hey, Madeline.
So the Wheeler Opera House board has one regular member. There will be an open position as Chip Fuller, who served as chair, expires 6 of this year. So we are looking to fill a full seat, and Chip indeed is reapplying. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for applying for our boards. As I always say, you know, the volunteer boards that we have in Aspen are part of what make us so special as a community and definitely help with the workload that we have in our community, representing our community. The first question that I always ask candidates is, are you familiar with the roles and responsibilities as well as the meeting requirements or dates and times of the board? Chip has been serving for a couple years, so I'm sure that he's got those memorized. Do you have the same understanding of the Wheeler Opera House Board?
Yes, I don't know when it meets, though.
Okay, Wednesdays, it's the second Wednesday, Chip? Second Wednesday, 3 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and just open it up to other council members. We are missing John Doyle tonight. He's away on vacation. And so you've got the 4 of us here, and I'll just start with anybody that'd like to start. Rachel, thank you.
Well, thank you, Chip, for reapplying. Thank you, Madeline, for applying. I'll start with a kind of softball for both of you. What skills or talents would you think you bring to the Wheeler and the Wheeler operations, Wheeler board? Thank you.
Well, I have a variety. I have a kind of a cross-section. I've been a manager, and so that's part of it, I guess. And I'm good with publicity. I saw that marketing is one of the requirements. And I have a pretty good financial overview, just having been the publisher of the Snowmass Sun and the Roaring Fork Weekly Journal. I manage those. So I think I could do all 3 of the main duties that are listed as what required as a board member.
Chip?
Thanks, and thanks for having me. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I have a sick kid at home, so I'm watching him. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, good. I kind of grew up around theater, doing acting and stage management in high school and college, and then in my most of my professional life, I've been in finance. So I've gone to business school, and I've spent a lot of time analyzing financial statements and various financial documents. So that has kind of helped me when it comes to what I think is one of the most important things of looking at the Wheeler, and it's their expenses and their income over the years.
Thank you, both.
Skippy?
You know, I'm kind of curious. So now that we've passed the expansion of funds to arts groups, I'm curious how you guys are thinking about coordination between the Wheeler and those other groups, as it may or may not relate to the expansion of artistic opportunities or presentations in the community. And either one of you can jump in first.
Because I'm present, I get to jump in first. Thanks,
Sure.
Skippy. Well, I think after going, after 2A was determined last year, I think that opens up a lot of doors for some of the smaller groups that maybe didn't have as much of a funding base. I think that just 2A changes sort of the role of the board members as well, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm still, obviously I don't have the experience that Chip does, but I am taking kind of a new view to this to come in, and I think that the groups perhaps will have a stronger leg to stand on, and will be able to do more because their funding base will be larger. And I'm sure, what is the second part of your question, Skippy? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I mean, we've kind of always had the whether it's the conversation or whatever about, what is the Wheelers' role? Is it just within the walls? Is it outside the walls? Is it in partnership? It is in isolation. And so I'm just wondering how this new landscape factors into that question for you, and how you would look at that or prioritize as the board member.
Yeah, well, I think, obviously the partnerships will be stronger, and that there will be more independent voices, again, because I think of the funding streams. So I think it's something else I wanted to bring. It's not a direct question of yours, but I feel that, again, coming from the outside and being a community member for almost 40 years, but still, I think it's incredibly important. One of my goals would be to keep the Wheeler accessible to full-time locals, to local residents, and however we would do that in terms of, if there's, just to put that as a priority. And I don't know if that trickles down to your question of how the groups would work, but I think the accessibility is a main part. And I think I'm going beyond your question here, and perhaps, but I do feel that in the pandemic, since this was one of the last major facilities to reopen to its full, that maybe the Wheeler needs to take a larger step back to remind the community it's there, that it's accessible, and that it's welcoming. I think the scaffolding has made it seem a little bit foreboding. It's not up anymore, but I think that both of those factors, the pandemic closure and the seemingly inaccessibility physically, gives it opportunity for the board opportunity to enlarge in its role, and maybe more marketing would be needed, or just to bring it back as that central place in the community that I think it belongs to, because it is such an important asset.
Thanks.
Thanks. I'll speak as an individual and not as a member of the board. But individually, like I've always believed that the red is such a fantastic resource, and 2A needed to be passed in order to bring the RET to the current times, and I think the changes were very much necessary, and I'm glad it passed. So far it appears that the new increased amounts going to the different arts groups and the 3 different categories that you guys are looking at is a great idea. It's addressing. The great thing about it is it's addressing the need for everything from the largest nonprofit arts organization in this valley to an individual artist that wants to, for example, get his paintings out there. So it's just amazing how the breadth of the impact of the RET is going to increase. I think that the board should continue to stay focused on the Wheeler itself, and provide recommendations regarding the RET and the arts grants. But I like the idea that the grants committee is a separate committee. I think that it is useful to have a board member on that grants committee. But I do like the idea that the grants committee is very separate from the Wheeler board.
Thank you.
Board?
Yeah, Chip, thank you for your service, and Madeline, thank you for your willingness to serve. My question is, I have a couple of questions. So one is on the level of programming currently at the Wheeler, and the programming mix and local access. So those are like 3 questions rolled into one. Do you think the level of programming is about right, not enough, or too much?
I'll go first since
Your turn.
First too. I think that the level of programming is not enough. I think that we got to a point before COVID where it was pretty much maxed out. And it was a fantastic benchmark for where we should be. So I think that, and I think we've been slow to come back from that. So I'm looking for next year getting to 80, 90% of what we were pre-COVID, and the year after that getting to 100% of where we were pre-COVID. In terms of programming, I think that the Wheeler needs to be looked at as a community asset for the entire community, and I've always been a strong advocate of that. And for example, I think that we need quite a bit more family-oriented programming. I think that's always really successful. And we need a good mix of programming for all ages. There's always been a 20s and 30s seems to be 20 and 30-year-olds seem to be not enough 20s and 30-year-olds at the Wheeler. So we have to figure out how to address that market. It's the weeks that I love at the Wheeler is when there's like a family musician one day and there's a national or a family-oriented magician one day, a national musician the next day, a local programming and some sort of movie or theater all in 1 week. So the Wheeler should be something that touches every single citizen in this valley. And I think that we've got some work to go to get there.
I would agree with Chip in that I believe there should be more programming, and that it does appear that it's been kind of a slow return after COVID, which is totally expected. And then in the summer, I believe there's the contract with the Music Associates, so I don't know how much, if there's any much opportunity for use for the public. The rest of the year, I think that there, yes, we could improve. I mean, it's great that the Wheeler is open to the schools for their, I think, Country Day and community. I don't know if they go back and forth, but they use that, which is I mean, that's the heart of the community, any of the school usage. My daughter was in the Aspen Santa Fe Ballet, and a long time ago, they used to dance there, and then they moved out to the district theater, of course, but it was great to see the Nutcracker there. So I think that, the mix of the local and, for me, again, I think that one of the things I am probably running on for this position is just the affordability, and especially now, and keeping it accessible to the locals. So, but I also believe that, some of those great acts that we have, well, then there's going to be plenty of events that that my family can't afford, but that we still should have them. So I think the mix of different, and I think Chip said it very, very well, and we want to make sure that the families, but also let's not remember the millennials and the Gen X, that we want to make sure that there's plenty and get them. We want a generation to grow up loving the Wheeler like we did.
And my second question is more financial, and since the Wheeler Board is an advisory board, I wonder if either of you have opinions on a drawdown model for the Wheeler Red with the new distribution of funds.
Chip, I'll let you take that one first.
I don't have an opinion on that yet. I think that I'm still looking at the alternatives and looking at what that would look like. I think as a member of the board, I've always been very strongly in the belief that the Wheeler should be first. So the expenses of the Wheeler and the needs of the Wheeler should be addressed first with the RET, because that's what the RET was created for. After that, I think that the arts groups, all the nonprofit arts groups should be able to get assistance through the RET. Then there's a whole bunch of alternatives in what you're talking about, Ward, in regards to what can be done with the RET and what can be done with additional money coming in. And I completely agree with the idea that the RET is an unbelievable resource that needs to be put to use instead of just sitting around doing nothing. So I don't know exactly the way to do it yet, but I think that but I'm always in the belief that that rep money should be spent and not held onto.
Thanks, Chip.
I would say that I agree that the Wheelers' needs and all of its expenses should be taken care of first. I don't have a clear opinion on additional monies, but I would like to point out that the real estate boom that we have seen is going to be slowing down, so I think we're going to have to give a good look. We've had so many fat years, and clearly the sales for the first half of this year were strong. I think that we're seeing quite a plunge. Now, what that does, I mean, obviously, we're not going to go into any terrible recession, but I just think we're going to have to really be careful with our dollars, maybe not next year, but moving forward in our collections and our appropriation. And, not being privy to or not having examined the budget closely. I don't want to speculate and say what it would be best spent on. But I just think in the future, we're going to maybe pull in our belt a little bit.
Thanks, Madeline. Do you want follow-ups?
Yeah, sure. Again, greatly appreciate you both applying. It's always difficult for us, or for me, when you're on interviews and they're reapplying people who've given a lot of time and you're balancing new energy and stability. So we always appreciate, and I think this is our most popular board. I'm surprised we're not seeing 6 other people vying for the seat as we have in the past. But what I was going to ask is, and I realize it just is open-ended and a little bit of imagination here, but are there facilities that would help support the arts within the Wheeler that could be added or improved, or are there more things that we could be doing, which I've heard other ideas of values that the Wheeler could be supporting within its 4 corners, not talking about getting out and doing other things, but.
Certainly, I mean, if this is an open-ended, like what else it could be supporting, I think school programs would be great. Any of the performing arts, in particular, the middle school, I know that they have not been able to complete those upgrades yet to the theater there. So I don't know if that means more use of the Wheeler for school things. And I kind of touched on that earlier. I don't know if we could do a red brick, just even an art show up in the 2nd floor in the lobby. I always appreciate when there's, like when we went to Aspen Extreme, which of course I never miss every year, our gang for that, always has a lot of animation up there. I think that we could do more with static displays, with get-togethers. I feel like that, again, the pandemic that the Wheeler lost its great stride. It's been rebuilding that, but why not have more activities up on that 2nd floor? Functions where you don't really charge a community group for that would be one example I would give just off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And Chip?
I think that there's a whole bunch of directions we can go on this, and I'll just throw out some ideas. I do think that when it's time to reevaluate the relationship with the music festival, that we should look into ways that we can get the lights on the Wheeler more in the summertime. And I think that having events on the summer events in the 2nd floor space that don't involve the theater is a great idea. So I'd like to get that going again. I also think things like, for example, 4th of July, the Wheeler was dark upstairs, and we've had events over the 4th of July at the Wheeler, even during the parade. So that's something that should get going again. I also think that there should be more options for the public to use the Wheeler on nights that particularly aren't big nights, like Mondays and Tuesdays, that aren't big performance nights. I think the Wheeler looks best when the lights are on and when you walk by and you see activity in it. So anything that can be done to increase that. Also, there is that property next door, the park, and other ideas would be to tent that temporarily or at various points of times of the year and have events there as well. Another thing is to do more partnerships with other facilities, hotels, and even SkiCo to increase events. For example, a few years ago, we were talking about the idea of having the comedy festival take place. Some of the events take place even on the ski mountain during the ski season, which I think is a great idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chip. Thanks, Madeline.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch very soon, and thank you again for just even coming in and your
you.
participation.
Thanks, Chip.
Thanks, Chip.
Take care. Bye.
We're going to move to our next board, which is the Local Licensing Authority. There's one open position here, and the applicant is Mr. Bill Murphy. If you don't mind, come on up to the table. Bill is current chair of the board, I believe. And again, his seat is the one that is open, so he is here reapplying, and he is our only applicant here.
Okay.
And my questions, of course, do not need to be asked. So I'll just go around the table and I'll look to my left first. Skippy, do you have any questions?
I guess the general, why do you choose to reapply? What do you hope to continue to contribute? Anything going particularly well, or things that you'd like to see change?
It's just the same entertainment.
To you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Thank you. Thank you for being here today, Bill. During the pandemic, we saw newer issues emerge about enforcement on local rules and some folks not paying attention to the public health order. I'm just kind of wondering in general, did it strike any sort of sense that there needed to be more enforcement powers or perhaps a fine schedule that you could work with? I don't know what sort of tools you have for administering violations and getting compliance.
We only resolve issues that are brought to us, and we don't have any powers to investigate anything, which is fine. I don't really think we need to be walking around town looking for issues.
Yeah, and no, that's not what I meant so much as when an issue is brought to your board, and I guess I'm thinking of the APCHA example where they really had to either pursue eviction or nothing type of range of alternatives when there was a violation, and now they've come up with more of a different fine schedule that they've adopted, so they have a different set of tools to administer, and I know sometimes you guys can suspend someone's license for a week or potentially revoke it entirely. I was just wondering if you felt there were any new or different tools you might need as a board coming from this past couple of year experience.
No, I don't really think so. It's set up so that we are presented with these options of dealing with it, and so far it's working.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I think.
Seems to be. We appreciate your role. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Ward?
Yeah, thanks for applying in your decades of being on the board. In all your experience on the board, has the board ever suspended a liquor license for any infraction?
Yes.
How long ago was that?
There's a place called Eastern Winds, so it was that long ago.
Okay.
And it was such a minor thing. We suggested, because it was such a minor thing, that they will suspend your license for one day, say at the end of April, and you can use it as a cleaning day. Because it was so minor, but it was brought to us and we had to do something. We recently had an issue with an establishment and getting conflicting information on it, and we just tried to make it work out so we didn't have to have a hearing, which would involve all the staff, which have better things to do.
And you were satisfied with that most recent, that was a COVID closing issue?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I just figured these guys are going to bury themselves sooner or later, and they'll be back.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Sure.
Thanks, Ward. Bill, I just want to say thank you.
Yep.
I don't have any questions for you. I think that your experience and your leadership on this board has helped us tremendously, so I just want to say my appreciation.
Maybe it's consistent, who knows?
Thank
See
you.
you guys.
Yes, Bill.
You're free.
Bring your umbrella.
The next board that we are looking at is the CCLC. We have Jeb Ball, Matthew Libanoff, and Gregory Lucier. If you guys are in audience and you want to come on up to this table, that'd be great. And we have Matt, who is actually on remote. Thank you. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for reapplying. Thank you for applying and your interest. As I always say, our volunteer boards are really what get a lot of the work done here in our community for our community. CCLC is a very interesting board because of its oversight of the downtown core where so much action is going on. The first question that I have, and of course, Jeb, you've been serving as the chair of the board.
Correct.
For how many years?
I've been on CCLC for 4 years.
4 years and current chair, and your term is one that is coming up. So you are reapplying. And we have one regular member, 2 alternate members still available to be appointed. So my first question, Jeb, I understand the answer from you, but Matthew and Gregory, do you know the meeting time for the CCLC, and do you have any conflicts of making Wednesday 8 a.m. meetings?
8:30.
8:30. Oh, wow.
There you go.
I have no conflicts on my end.
No conflicts on my end either.
Okay, great. And then both of you, you know the role and responsibilities of members of the CCLC. And part 2 of that question, have you been to a CCLC meeting? I'll start with Matt.
I'm aware of their oversight and directives. I've not attended a meeting myself.
And
Thank you.
I'm also aware of the oversight and directives, but I haven't been to a meeting either.
All right. Thank you, guys. And I'll look to council members for questions, comments. I'll start with Ward.
Thank you, all three. Thank you, Jeff, for your service and your willingness to serve, Matt and Gregory. Has everybody here on applying been to the Saturday market? Well, Jeb, I know you have. Been to the Saturday market, and what are your opinions on how it's run?
Yeah, I actually live right in the core on the corner of Hopkins and South Original, and have been to the market for many years now. And I think it's, first of all, a wonderful attribute to the community. So it's wonderful it's there. I think that the vendors that are there are very enthusiastic and very customer-oriented. I'd like to see a little bit more diversity in time in terms of different people using those precious spots. But, overall, I'd be very constructive about what it is doing today and ever increasing its appeal to the community.
Matt?
I quite enjoy how it's been operated, and I don't have any qualms with its current operation. To the previous speaker's point, I would love for there to be a more diverse offering, and I think that's going to come with looking at the stipulations for being a vendor, as well as really it's just been a joy to see like the inclusion of the music festival part. And how it was handled during COVID, I thought was also quite well. So I have no qualms with how it's currently operating, and I think there is only room for more, if anything, close more streets, get more vendors. That would be my only recommendation for it at this time.
Jeb?
Your question.
Since you've been to it, so would you?
I don't even know how to unpack all this.
Yeah.
What is your question specifically?
Well, it was, I know you've been to the Saturday market, you're deeply involved in it.
yes, I
and
have been to
If
the
you have
Saturday.
any qualms or recommendations or observations, areas for improvement?
No, I think if you take a look at where, the whole process has come over the last 5 years or so, I think the evaluation process has gotten a lot more scientific about the manner in which people are their applications are evaluated. And I think as a result of it, it's become much more competitive to get into the market today. And I think as a result of it, we have better vendors today than we might have had 10 years ago. That's my personal opinion.
And just a brief follow-up on that for Matt and Gregory. Are you familiar with the application process for vendors getting into the market?
I am not, no.
I'm slightly familiar with it, not in depth.
Okay. Thank you both, all three of you.
Rachel?
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking what a challenge our core is in so many ways, whether there's conflicts about odors from the alley and bear patrol on people's taking care of their waste appropriately, to encroachment, whether, you know, the sidewalks are there for people to walk on or not, and issues we've been challenged with balancing that traffic and bicycle and pedestrian. I think it's clear we've discussed many of the observations from the Living Lab project on Galena, and we'll be looking towards future changes. But I guess I would just ask, do you have great ideas about how to manage cars and pedestrians and bikes in ways that keep all three different entities safe? Or, I mean, we've been looking at communities that say, well, bikes can't go in this part of the town. Or did this Living Lab experiment point out more demographic differences between our users of the downtown? Any thoughts on how to create a more peaceful and harmonic experience down there?
I'll let one of the other, I mean, you're asking me a question I have an answer, but I'd be happy to defer to one of the other applicants first,
Well,
and I'll come last.
Thank you. We'll start with Matt.
Yeah, so I would say in response to the Living Lab and, you know, what I could promote or recommend for a harmonious living between the various transportation methods. The first idea would be to look at successful European cities such as Zurich and Copenhagen that have done a wonderful job of regulating their downtown core, their commercial core, and making sure it's safe for all the various entities. Being firsthand, you know, taking the bus, walking through the core during the Living Lab, I would say that it's my personal observation that the bike lanes are not being used as they're intended. And then in terms of what our commercial core is for and how it's being used, it's definitely been a detriment to many businesses and many families and many service technicians and the many people that keep our city and businesses running. The lack of parking has been a big impediment to them. So I would say it's really a balance of, you know, respecting who uses the core the most, as well as looking towards similar cities that have already implemented some policies and physical on the ground solutions that we could readily implement.
Thank you.
You know, first of all, I applaud the experimentation that's been taking place over the last month or two. But I would start with the outcome in mind, which is the core exists to be vibrant and vital, and that requires businesses to be successful. And I think, you know, this board, let alone this council, has to be very focused on how do you make sure commerce succeeds in a way that keeps this town incredibly vibrant. To me, that means emphasizing more of the walkers, because that's who's going to be browsing the shops and ultimately spending the money. I think the experiment, at least to me, as somebody who lives in the core, is that the bike lanes have been too pronounced and we've emphasized bikes too much. I understand the need for bikes, but I just say they take a secondary seat to the walkers, to the pedestrians. And then I would agree with what Matt has said. You know, parking has to continue to be optimized, figured out in a way that really, again, goes back to that outcome in mind, which is keeping this core economically vibrant and vital. And I think parking has just continued to be a challenge that I think has to be dealt with. So those are quick thoughts.
Thank you.
Rachel. I'd love to share some of our findings over the last 3 weeks that CCLC has pursued, but I'd be front-running the CCLC meeting
Yeah, I
this
understand
Wednesday
that.
at 8:30, and I'm just not prepared to disclose what our findings are yet. But ask me on Wednesday, I'd be happy to share it with you.
I can respect that. I understand that. But thank you all for your input on that. I guess I have one other question that's, just to say, as an advisory board, and I'm thinking frankly more of when I was dealing with county caucus situations, the caucuses are advisory too, but they'd like to think that they're lawmakers. How do you take when advice is either modified or not accepted at the council table?
Well, part of my life is I serve on public company boards. I'm well aware how governance takes place, of where committees can recommend and advise, and then ultimately decisions get made at a broader body. So I'm, quite understanding of how the process takes place and recognize the role of the board that we're talking about here.
Thank you. Matt?
And I also recognize the kind of the sovereignty of the council to make their decisions and for the advisory to be just that, an advisory committee. I'd like to say both my parents are attorneys, so I'm constantly an arbitrator, a mediator, a litigator. And so I feel that that's kind of my approach towards the commission itself, is to be that kind of mediating voice between the business owners and the pedestrians and the consumers, as well as the council who has to make the decisions.
Thank you.
Oh, it'd be remiss for me to say, sure, it's frustrating at times to see advice provided and then a decision is in a different direction, but it's just part of reality.
Well, I appreciate that. It's something that it's, for any of us, when we have a one narrow focus, we can say, wow, this would be right. But we have to take whatever comes back to us and look at the larger community focus.
I agree 100%. So it will be interesting to see what we do with all that feedback on Wednesday.
Exactly. Thank you.
I dovetail a little bit there, Rachel's question to Jeb. You've been at the commission for a while. Do we think that we have the right communication lines open at this time to get word from CCLC? Or would you make any changes to how your board does advise council?
Oh, I will stick up for Ward, who, has a really high level of participation in our meetings. He always is willing to hear our point of view, might not agree with it, but he's there to listen. So I feel as if we'd have a very good form of feedback through Ward to the rest of council. And I don't hesitate to call you if I need to either.
Thank you. Skippy, I'll go to you.
Yeah. The area where we in our annual survey have seen the most precipitous decline in public sentiment and satisfaction is affordability in the downtown core. The Saturday market is an example where CCLC has introduced what may be termed affordable or certainly local businesses. Matt alluded to an expansion of that, but I'm wondering how you see CCLC potentially playing a role in finding new solutions to that problem and what those solutions might be.
Well, I'm not coming here with any preordained ideas or solutions to that very challenging issue, but I would just completely concur that the board here, this committee, if it's making recommendations on that particular issue, has to be very forward-leaning. It is a real issue, and it concerns me greatly about the future of Aspen.
I think my response to that question would be is that I'm a big proponent of free market for foremost. And in terms of affordability in the downtown core, be it food businesses, be it services, I would say it would be, the place of the board to look at various solutions, including recommendations for policy and recommendations for also things that can be done outside of the traditional framework.
No, just one other thought. The one challenge here, being somewhat involved in real estate, is that you have landlords that have incredibly high staying power. And so they have the ability to require rents that don't seem to adjust as fast to the market as you would think, certainly in other towns that I'm familiar with. So I'm a whole proponent of free market, but the free market doesn't seem to move as dynamically in Aspen as it does in other places.
Do you have
It's
any
been a
thoughts?
topic that we've touched on, but we haven't really put it on a work priority. I mean, we'd be happy to undertake this activity if it was something that was worthwhile as it relates to providing at least an analysis and an analytical sense about what the options are. We just heretofore we haven't dealt with that topic.
You have any personal perspective?
Do I have a personal? Yeah, I think it's impossible to start a business in this town and expect to have any kind of retail presence unless you're well-heeled and don't exactly need a return on invested capital to run the business. It's impossible. The rent structure prevents that from happening.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Somebody agrees.
Gregory, if I could, you live in the downtown core. Is there a main thrust of your interest in CCLC? I mean, it's your neighborhood, if you will. So, do you think that you bring into a perspective of this as a resident of the downtown, or what is the angle for you for interest in CCLC?
Yeah, my answer would be I live right in the downtown core. I walk the alleyways. I'm there all the time. My office is in downtown in the core. I want to personally get more involved in city governance, and this is a first step for me to do so. And then in terms of my qualifications, I've been a CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies that had very large campuses with thousands of employees, that had lots of movement of people and cars, and so I give in those at least more isolated environments a lot of thought about how to move people and cars and bikes in some cases, and I just think it would be an interesting application of some experiences I've had.
Thank you for that. Matt, I have the same question for you, but slightly different. Your resume points to a couple of retail positions that you've had in Aspen. And I'm just wondering, is that the main thrust of your focus, is kind of about commerce and retail in downtown core, or is there some other reason that you're looking at CCLC?
I would say the reason I'm looking at CCLC is actually not because I'm in retail. The retail work that I do has been part of why I spend sometimes 18 hours a day in the downtown core. And like my fellow was just saying, it's walking the alleys, walking the sidewalks. All of our friends are business owners or trying to be business owners. My angle, I guess, would be that I also want to be more involved in city governance. I see the commercial core as where I spend the majority of my waking hours. And I hope to bring kind of the 25 to 35-year-old voice that's quickly dissipating from our town to our city governance and to our commercial core and the input on policy and decisions that affect it. It's been very hard to see these decisions get made without kind of an outlook for under 45-year-olds.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yeah, just one follow-up for Matt only. Sorry, guys. But Matt, if you are not selected for this board, we also have a next-gen board. We got some applicants behind you. Would you have any interest in sitting on that board potentially?
No, but I would be interested in the alternate for the CCLC as
Got it.
well.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much. We will be in touch very soon.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming
Thank
in.
you.
Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See you on Wednesday.
I'm excited to hear about that.
The next board that we have scheduled is for our Kids First Board, and we have Catherine Coleman. And Catherine is here with us. Catherine also filled out an application for planning and zoning, correct?
Yes.
On your planning and zoning application, I believe I saw that you were most interested in an alternate position, perhaps because of time commitments or what it might be.
Correct.
That's correct? Okay. So for Kids First Advisory, there is one alternate position open that Catherine is applying for. And then on P and Z, we are one regular and one alternate. And again, I remind you that Catherine is the applicant for that board. And her request was, at this time, was the alternate member to get her feet wet perhaps and
Yeah,
make sure
exactly.
that it works well for her. So my suggestion to council is, instead of having her stand up between these two boards, she can just stay there and we can talk to her about both Kids First Board and P and Z, and you can do that in any order that you like.
Have to like spin
Mayor,
your chair between.
I have a question of Kate. I think I've heard in the past that you can only serve on one board at a time. Is that?
I believe that's correct. I think some, depending on the type of.
Don't be shy, Amy.
Yes, Commissioner Hallenstein, you are correct in the sense that I think our code allows you to serve on one board only. Now, for those boards that are, P and Z, for instance, makes decisions. So if it's strictly an advisory board, we could certainly look at how that might implicate that rule. If there are two advisory boards and they're not boards that make decisions. In this case, P and Z is one of those boards. So to the extent she was asked to serve on P and Z, I don't believe it would be appropriate to appoint her to a second board.
Just sorting it out.
Yeah, so if you had to make a decision between the two,
Probably P and Z. But if there's space, and if there's, an exception or something that can be, worked around to allow for Kids First, I'd be interested in that as well.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, let me start with the P and Z type questions. Do you support the urban growth boundary and the Aspen area community plans goals for the community?
I moved here 2 years ago, so insofar as I know, I support the way that Aspen is growing, the way that it is, maintaining its character. Everything that I've seen so far seems to be on point.
Okay, have you attended a planning and zoning
I have
commission
not.
meeting? Have you read the land use code?
I have read some of it, yeah.
Okay, what do you think of the new demolition and short-term rental ordinances?
Well, the short-term rental ordinances, I'm interested to see how those play out. I came and I spoke with, your long-term,
Range planner?
yeah, what's
Ben-
her,
Ben or
no, the gal,
Amy?
Amy?
starts with a T. Her name starts with a T.
Do you make,
It might have been part of the team that was doing
Yeah.
work, but at
I
any
came
rate,
last week to talk to her about that, and, I was really impressed with what she showed me, the new digital interface that you guys have live for property owners to look and see, what their permit status is and different parts of, the zoning and all that. I thought that was, really great, really helpful. I am obviously of the younger age set, so these sorts of innovations are helpful, and I think, a way to move forward generally.
okay. Well, again, just planning and zoning is a lot of community character questions and a lot of very tough, often negotiations, or is this going to be better for the town or not? And then a lot of power push, if you've seen it before. But so how well do you say no? How well do you deal with, no, it sounds very convincing, but it's not in line with our community goals or community character?
I have no problem saying no.
Okay. And then, again, what about planning and zoning is attractive to you, or why,
Well, I own my condo. I purchased it last year in the core. So, I'm serving on the board of the HOA there. I really am getting my feet wet generally in the town and, having an ownership stake and part of the town. I work in real estate, It's something that I spend a lot of my time thinking about and working with clients on. So, for me, it really is, like Mayor Toya said, just getting my feet wet. And that's why an alternate position would be something preferable.
Okay, and then, do you have children, and what's the childcare interest? Just love kids, we all do.
My resume, you'll see that I've worked for about 9 years working with children, and I have a lot of volunteer experience working with young children, typically ages 3 to 13, in an outdoor enrichment environment in California.
Thank you very much.
Skippy?
The story in the news around Kids First has mostly been around changes at the Yellow Brick and our attempt to increase childcare capacity. And I'm wondering if you just had any thoughts about that goal, if you have, in your experience, not direct, but even anecdotal or in your community about the need, being of the younger generation, maybe through friends, et cetera.
I was very intrigued by those articles, to be honest with you, and that was the impetus for my interest in serving on the board. More because I had questions about, what was actually, driving it. I felt like there was a little bit more than was being reported. It seemed like it was, I don't know. I was very curious. I would like to have known, what discussions, went into those decisions, and yeah. I don't know about, and I have to admit, like I said, I moved here 2 years ago, and I did switch industries, about 5 years ago to real estate. So it's been a little while since I've worked directly with children and families and the childcare needs that they have. And, admittedly, I was in San Francisco, so it was a city, and it was a little bit different demographic, but a lot of the same families, would, be here too and would be interested in, these sorts of services. So, I guess I just would like a seat at the table. I'd like to be a part of, some of those discussions. I'm not really sure. I don't really have an opinion on what was going on with the Yellow Brick Road. I'm interested to see what happens. I'm definitely keeping my eye on that. But
Are there any particular areas from within kind of the scope of childcare that are a particular passion point for you that motivated you to get involved or stay involved?
Outdoor education. Yeah, children outdoors.
Yeah. And then on the P&Z side, I'm going to flip around the chair. Outside of having kind of a cursory look at the land use code, have you done work with land use before, either in your professional role or otherwise?
Not much more than research for clients for, different properties and parcels. And, I have been thrown, some really interesting, cases, and, not just working in Pitkin County, but, also down in Eagle County and Garfield as well. So, for me, it's I'm interested in learning more and getting more exposure generally. So.
Yeah. And then the last kind of general question about P&Z, how do you think about growth, but change in particular in the built environment as it relates to a community?
Well, it's definitely a challenge to grow, change, but also, keep something, kind of that's character specific and unique. I think projects like what is being proposed down in, downtown Basalt, for example, is I don't know if you're familiar with that project, but, I think that's probably a really good example of, change, but growth, but also keeping the character of the area, and enhancing, the character of the area. I don't know how many spaces like that there are here in Aspen to do something like that, but, on smaller scales, I'm sure that there are similar projects with the spirit of the idea.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks, Gibby. Ward, did you have any?
No, I think you expressed your preference for being an alternate on P&Z, and with your real estate background, I feel that'd be a good fit for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ward. What made you decide to move to Aspen?
To be quite honest, skiing.
Good reason.
How long
Yeah.
had you visited Aspen
No, I
before?
came for one weekend and I was bit by the bug, if you will, or the Ute Indian curse, as they say. I just didn't, I didn't even know a place like this, existed. And, I love to ski and love to be outdoors. I was living in, Los Gatos in Northern California, and, it's a beautiful area, but the ocean wasn't really my scene so much as the mountains. So, I came here right before COVID happened, so it took a little while to get here, but I got here about 2 years ago this month.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have another follow-up?
Yeah, just, the community has a goal, and it's no longer articulated this way, as 60% of the workforce should live within the city limits. And now it's more of a round goal as opposed to a percentage. And that was always kind of a, reach goal anyhow, not that it's been particularly obtainable. Do you believe that we should try to balance working, living community here in Aspen with the free market that we see exploding and the values that are exploding? Are you supportive? Have you followed the lumberyard project
Yeah.
that's going forward
Sure.
out at the business center?
Yeah, sure, I am, certainly. Without locals living in town, we lose the character of town.
Okay. Because that sometimes leads to difficult choices and
Yeah, I understand.
difficult decisions.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I do have one more question. One more thing.
Columbo?
Colombo. Have you read the Aspen Area Community Plan?
No, I have not, actually.
Okay,
Yeah,
recommended reading.
okay, perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for applying. It's really great also looking at your background and your education. You seem to be a well-rounded person, and it's interesting. You've only lived here for a brief time, and your interest from Kids First Board to planning and zoning kind of says a little bit about, I think, who you are. So I just thank you very much for coming in and applying, and we'll be in touch with you very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you
Nice
all.
to meet you.
Thank you.
As well.
And that'll bring us down to our last board this evening is Next Gen. And we have Michaela Carpenter and Zachary Kops. Did I say those right? And for Next Gen right now, we are actually at 3 regular members still available and 1 alternate member still available. And these are our 2 applicants for those 4, if you will, spots. So with that, as you've heard me say a couple times already, are you aware of the roles and responsibilities as well as the meeting times? However, you don't need to answer that because this board is really in, I'd say almost its next incarnation of Next Generation. So when your meetings will be can be determined by this board. When your roles and responsibilities on this board can also be somewhat shaped by this. So it's really an open opportunity. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleagues for questions. And I'm looking first down at Ward.
Well, I've been disappointed with Next Gen, and it's been a long time since we've been able to have a functioning Next Gen. It's disappointing. I'm looking for somebody to come along with an idea that can reinvigorate this board and act as see a phoenix on it, come from the ashes and become active. So I welcome both of you. Zach, I don't know you, Michaela, I know your presence in town. But if you guys would be active members, I'd be supportive of it. Do you both want to be regular members or?
Yeah.
I do.
Oh, okay. That's about the extent of my questions.
And I understand why.
Hang out for the hardballs, guys.
Rachel.
Yeah, I'll maybe follow Ward in the sense of being a comment as opposed to a question. Because if you've sat here through an hour of our other interviews, you're obviously committed and dedicated. So I appreciate that. And the involvement of our younger generations is critically important to this town and to our country at this point. The thing I would just like to say is that I think we are acutely aware that there's an affordable housing crisis. And for a while, the only thing, or the main thrust of what I was hearing from Next Gen was about the housing crisis. And we're kind of doing everything we can, and we're looking to the appropriate funding from STRs to be able to backfill housing and to complete. You may have followed in the papers, I've pushed the county to get more involved in that housing issue. But it's always going to be with us. So I've seen a little bit of a progression of some next-gen people from it's all housing to, oops, now it's childcare because their lives and their families change a little bit as we all do. So I guess I'd just like to say I'd like to see what we can do to find that's really actionable that you can bring to us of how projects are shaped, or are we thinking about this generation enough in how Wheeler programming is happening, or we're looking towards lower categories for the startup on housing. Some people say, hey, rentals only, but would you want to be a rental for your whole life? Probably not. Build no equity. So just actionable type of considerations would be really well appreciated, and I'd be happy to appoint you both. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks.
May I comment on that?
Sure, please.
Well, just to introduce myself again.
Yeah, please
Zach
do. Sorry about
Copps.
that.
I was born here, actually. Took some tennis lessons from our mayor over there. So
How did he
was
do?
out. Well, I didn't go professional, so say something. But
And I did good.
really, to your point, Ward, though, I was actually out of the valley for the last 12 years, and I came back specifically to be part of this community and this culture again. So I do recognize what you're asking, and I do know some of the members on the board and some of the struggles as well. So I'm certainly hoping to fill the role you're asking for, Ward, bringing that new energy in and bringing it back to life. And to answer your question, the first thing that comes to mind is transportation.
Yeah.
A lot of people, from my friends out east where I was in the Boston area, we had our own issues with affordable housing and whatnot, and so we got pushed farther out. But as long as there was a way into town or into the activities, we still found it. So that would be maybe an area, because there's only so much land, but there potentially could be alternatives for transportation.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
to follow up, I would be so excited to talk about things besides housing and childcare, and I'm sure that you guys would too. I do not envy your roles, and I think they're really honorable. I think transportation is on my list, and Rachel, you mentioned, overarching values and goals of the town. I think something that the Next Gen Committee can really focus on is defining them. Over the last 3 years, we've all seen an influx of different value systems from all over the country, and then combining that with our already existing conflicting value systems between different subsets of people who live here. I think there's a huge opportunity to really start drawing a circle around in which direction we want to be moving. From that point, I feel like, oh my God, the list is endless of things that we could be excited about and working on in terms of creating a more enriching experience for the people who are investing and contributing to the town long term, and whether they're renting or buying. I think that if we can be supporting and nourishing their lifestyles in other ways, I think there's a lot to be said to that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both. Did you have any?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to you guys jumping in. You kind of started to answer the questions, and I'll answer them, but just for context, I was one of the founding members of this, so I know the intention when we started was to get beyond, single issue advocacy, right? To create a group that could advocate for younger voices in town forever. And the vision was always like, we hope that when we're 70 or 80, there's a group of 20s and 30s bothering us the way we are seemingly bothering them right now, because you need that diversity of opinion set. And it's been, worrying to see this lull, and there's this opportunity for the reboot and something that really has staying power. So I guess I was going to ask individually some of your thoughts around issues that need to be tackled. And this may be more thought than you've put in, but if you have any thoughts around successful structure for what this looks like to really memorialize it so that when you guys roll off, there's always someone refilling in a way that there's clear continuity of conversation between this board and that board.
You can start.
I'll start by saying I'm only sitting here because of Michael Miracle. I don't know if you guys are aware, he's doing a huge push to really make sure that this board survives.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. That being said, I thought it was really effective.
Yeah.
And so the first thought that comes to mind without looking at any structures elsewhere is that I would effectively be responsible for replacing myself when my interim came to term. I'm someone who takes my commitments very, very seriously, and I don't say that lightly. And so I think, a transition program of some kind, and maybe there's a period of overlap in which the newer board members are sitting with the older board members, albeit for one meeting or 6. But I do think that having us be accountable to its survival, not just as an acting member, but as a graduate of, could be exciting. And then we could really be pulling people who are in the younger generation into a level of contribution and engagement that they might not otherwise sort of be on their radar. So that would.
That's a great idea.
Well said. I would agree with that, so I'm going to comment on the other part of your question, which is more specifics of things. And, again, to the transportation and more of the workforce development. A lot of people come for Aspen Ski Co., and it's because of a couple reasons that it's easy for them to get here. So is there other structures we could put in place for other general businesses or local businesses that provide that same support network, really, to bring new people and younger people in and make them feel part of it, because it is an intimidating environment at times, and when you come here you can feel easily pushed out to the side. So I would focus more on I guess really giving that demographic the ability to be a community member. An example was transportation, but maybe there is some sort of a subsidy for something that they're enjoying, like a bus pass, something like that makes it more accessible. So just kind of thinking from that angle.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Skippy. I don't have any questions for either of you. Just your input, even in this meeting with these other questions, has been really enough to say that your interest is there. And if your interest is there, then I think you're going to be successful at it. Did you say you were gone for 12 years back east?
That's true.
What were you doing back east?
I was studying biomedical engineering.
I didn't notice it in your resume. What are you doing now?
Well, actually came back to help with the family business, Mountain Greenery, Plantscapes. So we were just, local plant shop, local business. So
Nice.
helping run the business.
Zach, we have a common bond. I have a daughter that has an engineering degree from Tufts as well.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great to hear.
Environmental engineering.
Oh, really?
Does she have a tough time?
She's a jumbo. She rode.
You too. Okay. Thank you so much for coming in. Yeah, we'll go on for hours just making some jokes here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Touch very soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Very good.
Council members, that is all of the board interviews that we have for this evening. As usual, we will have conversations and figure out where we want to do and how this fits best with what we need here in the city.
Okay. I'd like to take just a short break between going into the next topic, if we could.
Sure, next topic is just,
Reports and reports.
that's it.
Yeah.
Sir, go right ahead. We'll go ahead and take a couple-minute recess, and we'll be right back to finish up our work session. Thank you very much. We are back after just a short break. This is the Aspen City Council work session for August 15th, 2022. We just finished board interviews. Now it's just an opportunity for council members to share board reports and any other council updates or items that they want to bring to the table for future discussion possibilities. With that, we'll start with board reports. I'm going to look at Ward because he's been.
See how the lobsters were.
Let's get a ward report.
A Ward report.
Yeah, I did have lobster the first couple of nights back, but not after that. We had a Sister Cities meeting, August 11th, and which was pretty active. There's John Armstrong is stepping back after 28 years on representing Chamonix. There is a member from Chamonix coming to visit, and evidently Skippy is unavailable for that.
That is sort of correct.
Okay, well, that's,
Spending significant time with them. I just am not going to be there on Saturday.
yeah, that's just one of the things that's happening. Morris also, and I can't remember Morris's last name, my bad. He's been serving as treasurer for the last few years, and now Jan Pfeiffer is taking over, but Morris is going to stay on as a financial advisor. There is going to be a workshop with the city of Aspen and the thrift shop on grant writing that's coming up. I can't remember the date for that, but I think that'd be worthwhile. Following up on a grant request, it's come through in the past with the town of Snowmass Village that we haven't seen that yet. So I think that probably Betsy Ann is going to be looking to follow up on that. Pat Fallon, who was a current board member, was a past board member of the city council and mayor pro tem, one of the founders and president of Sister Cities, just received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Sister Cities International, the highest award that is given out by Sister Cities International. And that was awarded to her in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a couple of weeks ago. So that's something to be really proud of, and her continuing work with the Aspen Sister Cities. Flight of the Ducks is going to happen. Again, it's going to be virtual. They're not going to be ducks going down the river, but it's a fundraiser, and some of the kids are involved in it, and the money's going towards supporting trips, exchanges.
Ducky Derby?
Yeah.
Saturday?
Yeah, they're calling it Flight of the
This
Ducks.
past Saturday.
It was passed.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right, well,
I didn't win
They flew.
again.
they flew. I was in transit on Saturday.
They flew by your plane.
Yeah, that's what that was.
That's what that was.
Is it forever non-physical now, or?
I don't know. Nothing's forever anymore.
Okay.
I don't know what's going to happen. Working on memos of understanding with the school district. That's a work in progress. Arts opportunities. Visual Aspen, I think, is a business that visited the Sister Cities booth on a Saturday when they were there, and has offered up some materials to be used for a fundraiser for Sister Cities. Discussions about the Aspen Flag Day and Week banner flags on Main Street, travel policies, and finally, there's a Chimakapu in January is going to have 15 students coming here. And the mayor will be here and wants to meet with Tori, and is also very interested in working a relationship with ACES.
Know about it today.
I did. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Bariloche, this September 15th is celebrating 20 years as a sister city of Aspen.
Hey.
I'm going to be going to Bariloche. There is going to be a adaptive skiing exchange, medical exchange, ski patrol exchange is all going on. I'll be meeting with the city government with those exchanges Also interested in meeting with the people for the parks that are Mike Tunte and Austin Weiss went to Bariloche and are working with them on setting up a park, a national park actually, just adjacent to Bariloche. So looking forward to that as well. And there is, there'll be a request. I bought my ticket to Bariloche already, and if their City of Aspen can contribute some towards that, that would be deeply appreciated. And there is a travel stipend from Aspen sister cities of $1,000 that can be awarded to me for that trip. We've had a RAFTA meeting that I missed. I was on the water kayaking that day. There was a governance committee meeting of CoA, and that was last Thursday, I think. And we're seeking, it was a first meeting with Dallas, who is the new executive director, and we will have a full board meeting, I think this Thursday or next. That'll be his first, I think it's this Thursday, his first full board meeting. And we're, at the governance committee, we're seeking, we expanded the number of board members and are looking for more non-electeds. So we're looking at approaching 4 members of the community to be on the board and presenting those to the full board for interviews and direction. So that's, I think, the extent of my my board activity in the last.
We're just wondering, do the existing members of CoA, like the city, have to approve a change to add more board members?
Yeah, that's already been, it's the full board had some changes to the bylaws to add more members. There was some talk going on between maybe partnerships with another environmental group in the valley and wanting to make room for some governance.
I mean, it sounds like a good idea. I'm not opposed to it, but I just don't recall being at a meeting where we approved a change to the bylaws by the city. I mean, I'm just, is it separate from city boards in that sense, that they?
Yeah, I don't think the core board needs, it's its own 501c3, and I don't think it needs approval of changes in their bylaws.
I just didn't know, as because we contribute to them through the REMP.
Yeah, we certainly do.
Yeah.
And there's been, there been some pretty frank discussions on the board about Pickens County's contributions, about their pet program contribution versus REMP funding. It's been an open discussion, and CORE's going in the right direction. They have a new director, an emphasis on fundraising, and a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, this council gave directions to CORE to look for diverse funding.
Yeah.
And we've gotten some from Eagle County, a board member from Eagle County now, and they're interested in participating.
Yeah, again, it has nothing to do with the purpose as much as just protocol.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because it relates to one of the boards I'm on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that there needs to be approval of a bylaw change by the city council. I don't think so.
Don't know.
We could double check,
I
but
would just note that Mr. True is back in the office tomorrow, and he would know all the historical background to these boards, and he might be a much better resource than I am at
yeah,
this point.
it just so we can follow the steps appropriately, that's all I was thinking.
Yeah, we did have a board bylaw changes several months ago. I think it was actually about the time that we started the search for a new executive director.
Makes sense.
Right on.
Very good. Okay, I'll try not to take too long here. I think the most important meeting I attended last week was, well, two, they're kind of overlapped. The Bureau of Reclamation had its annual Rudeye Reservoir Operations meeting in Basalt on Wednesday, and that was followed on Thursday night by the Rudeye Water and Power Authority Board. And I'll try not to mix and match going back too much, but on the Rudeye Water and Power Authority Board, we have a very big budget challenge. There's no profit center to it, and currently all the members pay the same dues, about $6,100 a year. Yet the Rudeye Water and Power Authority was authorized by the state and given certain obligations and responsibilities by the state when it was put together, which right now the budget only allows for, I think, about 8 hours a week to be dedicated to Rudeye Water and Power Authority. So we have not yet come up with a better and fair system to raise the dues that would be acknowledging that some of the members, such as Carbondale, are certainly important members of the watershed and important to that organization, but they're not on the river perhaps the same way that that others are, and or have a hydropower interest, or like Eagle County, all of the frying pan as it goes up there. So I think we're basically going to be asking for close to the same budget this year as next, for next year as this. I suggested towards the end of the meeting that maybe we consider asking everyone to go up by $1,000 or something, but we come close to running in the red and are drawing down on reserves. We don't have the real resources to do the type of formula comparisons of all the different members' economies and population, and should it be sales tax based or property tax based or number of people based in terms of what your dues should come up to. But I can tell you that Rudeye having, it's almost like a RAFTA in the sense that it brings the communities together that normally don't have business together. And when you're trying to deal with whether it's the Colorado Water Conservation Board or other entities, it's a lot better, I think, to have the letter come from Carbondale, Snowmass, Aspen, Pickens County, Basalt, Glenwood Springs, as opposed to just Aspen saying we're worried about the water supplies or this or that. So it's regional grasp is pretty much the most important. And if we go back a little bit historically to when Mark Fuller used to run Rudeye Water and Power Authority on a part-time basis as a contract employee, that was when the county funded the very large watershed plan for the whole watershed, because we are very interconnected. And there was a lot of things that were thought could be done better and should be done more effectively for water, but there was no real oversight entity for us, you know, in that same sense. There's the bigger river district, which balances the needs of Moffett County with Cortez, you know, I mean, it's just a crazy lowest common denominator. So eventually a larger increase in ask for dues is going to be coming forward, I guess is the best way I can put that. But at least right now, we're not there yet as to what that ask would be. But it's starting to feel like it's really not fair to say a town like Aspen with the budget we have versus Carbondale should put in the exact same amount per budget. It just isn't equitable. And there's no tax money, there's no property tax, there's no support for this organization other than membership dues. If anything, April has been very successful in pulling down some grants and maybe a small amount of administrative fees. Highly successful in terms of the fish inspection program to keep the invasive mussels out of, and that's been with a lot of work getting some actual funding from the Bureau of Reclamation towards those purposes, because it's a combination of the Forest Service has the boat ramps and the Bureau of Rec has the dam. So getting between the two has been challenging. The big project that they have obtained accelerator grants for and have been working on, and I have to dig it back out to get the right names here, but it is a unified permanent watering restriction goal within the valley, the entire watershed, because everybody lives in a different place than they work, and some say water every other day, and some say water every third day, and some say water only between 10 and 6, and others say 9 and 4, is the forbidden time. So how can we start to get more of a unified message? And we all know the water shortage we're having. We know what's going on with the Colorado River. We know the drought. So landscaping and watering, outdoor watering, is a part of that puzzle. And that's something they're going to come back to us in the November with the final report of what the recommendations are and how to deal with what are some objections. I mean, most of the counties in our watershed are not water providers. And so people are on wells, they're not on the same situation as a municipal lawn and able to put some restrictions in. I'll just read the titles of these things that Root Water and Power Authority is supposed to do on its basically unfunded budget. The Root Water and Power Authority is a board of regional elected officials that mobilizes resources and influence to benefit the waters and communities of the Roaring Fork Valley. So we have research issues to promote, sponsor, manage, and direct research on issues pertaining to protection, improvement, management, development of the Roaring Fork, support water for hydropower, the use of Root Water Authority power, through contract with Bureau of Reclamation, contribute to the release schedule, which is very important. Sometimes they have enough, they can do a coordinated release, which helps the endangered fish, sometimes not. Communicate with one unified voice, support and consult on all things water, facilitate communication and cooperations, and comment on land use. So, and those are outside of what the members would like to see Root do when they were asked, what would you like back for your dues? So we have some real challenges there. But I'm going to segue into the Bureau of Reclamation meeting on Root Water and Power, which was the night before. And it really was one of the best presented meetings on that I've heard. They gave us a great deal of real context. And that context is the drought and the endangered fish on the 15-mile reach. And that's where the water is pulled out right before going to Grand Junction to run the power plant and to water the orchards. And when there's not enough water in the Colorado for that purpose is when the cameo call comes on, and diverters such as Twin Lakes have to stop diverting. So we get a little more flow during those time periods. But the Root contracts have been sold to groups such as Ute Water in Grand Junction and things like this. The scary part of the presentation was hearing the Bureau of Rec and the River District both saying Root is filling less and less each year. And the operations in the past have been allowing 41 cubic feet per second to flow during the winter to prevent the frying pan from growing anchor ice, which is ice that grows from the bottom of the river up because there's not enough flow and it's too cold. And anchor ice destroys your fishery. It will scour the bottom and take away all the eggs and all the pebbles they need for spawning and things like this. So anchor ice is really bad. The Roaring Fork Conservancy did a really good study on that, and they would like to see like 70 cubic feet per second or maybe even 90. But the thing is guaranteed 30. And they've been doing about 40 to 41 CFS past few winters. The presentation by the River District fellow who was there for both nights told us that in order to have enough water in carryover from one winter to the next season and to try to fulfill all the contract water that they've sold and things like that, they are going to try to cut back to the original operating standard, which was only 30 CFS in the winter, period. The Water Trust has been, is a nonprofit group, has been finding and paying people different monies to try to release more at different times, but it's just not looking good. It's just going to be less and less water at Root, which affects our hydro operations. And in the course of this, I've asked them for some different graphs of what they've shown. They showed a great graph of all the different water rights. Root as a total full would hold about 102 acre feet, 102,000 acre feet. And there's a dead pool at the bottom, and there's some fish water, and there's this and that. But I've asked them to give us a kind of a view of when those different contracts get called and how are they stacked and how do they come together. There's been a goal of trying to keep the releases in the summer below 350 CFS per second, cubic feet per second. So again, it doesn't destroy the fishery, and so it doesn't endanger fishermen in the water and knock them off their feet. And it really shouldn't be flowing that high after runoff. That's usually when the fish get a little lazy and fat, and you're kind of doing spring runoff conditions year round. The frying pan is very much in danger of eventually becoming a flume because they're trying to manage those releases now, but when the day comes and people just call it now, they have to deliver it now, and so they let those waters go. We had a great deal of discussion about the situations with Lake Powell and Lake Mead and the overall drought. We are assured that Rudai is not part of the Colorado River system, of which reservoirs such as Blue Lake and others are, and Blue Mesa, which released last year. But you also just never know when you're having a crisis of those proportions. So that was the biggest message, is really that the drought it's not filling as much, and they are thinking that they're not going to be able to release as much to keep the river healthy in the winter in order to fulfill other water contracts in the summer. There was one other little detail there. I think that's about it, but it's very concerning where we go from. Oh, I know. Well, two other things is they're getting much better at the mapping of snowpack, and they're going to be installing some more higher up snowpacks in the Frying Pan Valley. And there's getting to be great techniques of really ground truthing the snowpack and getting a geological picture of the ground without snow and then with snow, and they can tell how much really is in that snowpack and snow moisture. So there were very in-depth presentations about how they're measuring snowpack, and also the endangered fish and the endangered fish recovery program. And that sounds awkward, but without the endangered fish recovery program being in place, anyone who applied to use any water or change water use in Colorado would have to deal with federal authorities on how their new water depletion is not going to affect the endangered fish. So instead, we have a statewide program that tries to moderate those issues. And that was really the lowdown from those two. But any questions?
Yeah, I do. The predicted changes in flows, both lower in the winter and higher in the summer. Can you talk about how that does affect the hydropower generation, what that means in real terms?
Well, I am not the expert. We'd have to ask Tyler on that. But if it gets too low, you can't turn at all. And when it gets to a certain level of low, you don't produce as much because there's not as much weight or head in that to go forward.
And when it's flowing faster, if there's more calls, I assume there's no storage, so it just kind of goes to waste.
There's no storage, it's just transmission.
Yeah.
And Sarah looks like she can answer.
There's a maximum generation capacity, and it's a safety mechanism of the generation equipment. And so during a release, we might come
your
close
mic
to
is
that.
not
The
on.
microphone is on, and I'm right next to it. Can you not hear it?
You can't get any closer.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. All right. So that was key, is just that there, some of the safety mechanisms, it's a 5 megawatt generation facility, getting 4.8 during a drawdown is a side, I guess it's the sweet constellation prize of the fact that the call down has happened. But that is not a consistent pull either. We can pull information for you. We've had to turn that off a little bit this summer for generation already.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fair to say that we would expect a diminishing return from that resource over time.
I don't know if that's the case, but it's just, calls into question how serious the drought is, how serious climate change is going to be affecting. I mean, our real reservoir is the mountains.
Yeah.
And that's what fills our reservoir to turn the hydro. So I'm not going to make any predictions there, but it is concerning. The two other things that kind of relate into this topic were that the River District put the language up on the board, and I've sent the slides that I got from this on to Tyler from the meeting. But the slides, what the hell do they show? They show, that they're trying to negotiate with the Bureau of Reclamation if they're doing the divvying of the water when it comes in appropriately between the Boosted Tunnel going to the Front Range and what's filling Route I. And they seem to have come down to a discrepancy of about 600 acre feet. And, they're like, oh, it's 600 acre feet. I'm like, 600 acre feet, do you know what that costs down on the Front Range? It costs a lot. And so they're going to pay more attention to how it's filling. There's language that's contradictory, frankly, and the Front Range is reading it differently than we are. But there was concern that we were not getting our full equal share of fill there. And the River District also were able to say that, hey, hydro is the last priority on this, it's not a priority. The water calls, the water that's being sold, the taking care of the endangered fish, that's a priority, but the hydro was, quote, an add-on. Now, I think the city of Aspen disputes that, and when I was at the Rudai meeting about a year and a half ago, filling in for Ann Mullins, who couldn't make it, Tyler was there, and they presented a letter that I had signed as mayor 20 years ago, telling him we were concerned with the hydro water. But I'm not sure that, and that was when they were doing a new EA for some new contract sales. And I don't think we got any credit or any give in that. So there's just concerns there, and that's where it's going. But maybe the landscaping watering plan will be a good thing.
A lot of governments have signed on that.
Yeah, I know, it's a challenge, but they've been working, they've been vigorously interviewing, not April, but the people who were contracted with Western Resource Advocates, which is out of Boulder, and the Water Now Alliance have been the partners. They've been interviewing everyone's parks department and everyone's, committees. I mean, there's thinking of a lot of exceptions, like, yes, you can keep watering if it's new planting, or if you need to keep your ball fields up for your schools or things like this, but they still would really like to get us to having, and more getting rid of the name restriction perhaps, and just having it called the watering program or the watering protocol or something like that, but have it permanent and not be bouncing in and out of different stages of drought and landscaping restrictions. And the first to acknowledge there's a lot more to do. People over-landscape the way they buy a fuel-hungry car when prices of gas are cheap, and then when waters and gas are bad, they're like, how do we unload this? And getting more truly native vegetation planted rather than exotics that require far more water, things like that. So that was the Rudai Water and Power Authority report. We've not had a housing board since our last board's update. That will be this week on Wednesday. Thank you.
Rachel, I had a question.
Yeah, please.
I thought I read somewhere that BLM said that if the states don't come up with management policies, that they would take over the management?
Yeah, and it's not BLM as much as it's other agencies, Bureau of Rec and Department of Interior through their water agencies. That was discussed pretty heavily at the Club 20 meeting, and there are people, they had Becky Mitchell from the state speak first, who's CWCB, and then Greg Walsher speak second, who is a private citizen now, but he was a former director of Department of Natural Resources under Governor Owens, and he was a former Club 20 director. Becky was as polite as you can be as an elected official and saying, hey, look, we're already telling all the lower basin states that we've already cut back. We cut back every year. We cut back based on how much snow we have, and we can't get more snow. And so people who are juniors on our system have already been turned off and are turned off when various calls come on. So they're a little like, we're not even taking our full share yet, and we already just cut back everything we can. On the other hand, California has a lot more legislators than we do, and I think the whole country depends on the Imperial Valley for their lettuce. And so, there's going to be a lot of political gamesmanship behind the scenes. There's a concurrent bill that Senator Hickenlooper and Bennett have, I think, got passed, maybe a component of this larger bill, I can't remember, but it's to provide funding to pay farmers to fallow their fields. And the question I asked, are we paying farmers equally on the Front Range to fallow their fields, or just the farmers on the West Slope? Because once it goes over the hill, there's no return flow. Farmers here, at least there's a return flow to the Colorado River. And so that's a little scary. It's great. It's only for people willing to go fallow, willing to not grow. But you can't take a field out of production for too many years before you can't bring it back. You can't take fruit trees and stone fruits out of production. And it could be the next step to the buy and dry of all of the West Slope. So there's a lot of concerns about that. But that's where it's at. Any other questions? No. But so we don't know what's going to happen with that. Colorado's put out its 5-point plan of what we're doing. We're still waiting for the lower basins to respond.
Board reports this evening?
No reports since the last one, but two things related to. First is in the world of sister cities. I finally got to do a full debrief with Jill after the trip to France, which was super nice. And just wanted to check in with you guys on next steps. First, as Ward mentioned, Nolan, who's going to be our first exchange student since COVID, is coming over this weekend with his mom, Agnes. They hosted me at their house when I first got there. Awesome family. There is an event at Jill's house welcoming them 4:30 to 5:36 on this Saturday. So if anyone wanted to go, she wanted me to just pass along that invite. And then if that doesn't work or you'd prefer it, Monday night, because I'm out of town at my grandma's dedication this weekend, Monday night, I'm going to do dinner with them just out in town somewhere. And if any of you guys want to join, I know they'd love to meet council members. So those invites are just sort of both out to you guys. And then in terms of just sort of follow-up from my trip, just as a brief recap, I got to meet with Jacques, head of Sister Cities, you all know, the mayor, Eric, and about 6 other council members, a number of staff. We talked about sort of the reinvigoration of the Sister Cities program after COVID, more exchange. We also talked about policy exchange, specifically environment, transportation, and housing, just learning from one another, potentially entering some form of, organizational things together, whether it's us doing climate pacts there or the mayor and them here. And the sort of last piece is they had a council member there. They have like areas, they're not kind of generalists like we are, who's focused on community outreach and such. And so he's doing a new pilot program where, just as an example, there's $100,000 in their budget, which is sort of public appropriation. The public gets to pitch projects, they get to vote on what they fund, and he oversees that integration. So there's just some interest in like learning about what that is and how it goes. And so Jill wanted to send a follow-up email. I told her I would kind of draft the list of those things, get it over to their staff and mayor, and just say, hey, how do we begin to make this stuff actionable in some way? So I just wanted to kind of, run that all by you guys and see if there's a particular way in which to do that or whatever. But we wanted to just take those conversations and start to make something real of them.
Very good. Sister Cities was really the genesis of CoA back in the day. There was a very large Sister City gathering that was called Energy 2000 so long ago. And we had a lot of the European sister cities there. And it was a little bit embarrassing in a certain sense because they were already doing things that we hadn't adopted. And we're all talking about these great things we could or should do. And they're like, no, people don't get individual lotion and shampoo bottles at the hotels to throw away, as a keepsake. They have bottles that get refilled, and they have the door keys that go into your light switch, and if you don't put them in your light switch, your lights don't work. And so when you leave, the lights have to go off, and just any number of other things. But that was a little bit of the genesis of it back in the day.
That's cool. That's super
Sterling,
cool.
because he was a Sister Cities person, was very involved, and we had representatives from all our sister cities at that time.
Nice. I did miss a couple of things on Sister Cities and about Shimakapu. we're sending 15 students, 11 high school, 4 middle school, to Shimakapu October 8th, and they will have a group coming here the 4th through the 13th of January. And that they are looking for 3 hotel rooms for their mayor and some staff members the 7th through the 14th of January.
I think it's low season.
Yeah, and one more on Bariloche. They have a company there that I'm going to try to meet with that actually manufactures and designs satellites that are being used, and they do work with micro-nuclear power production too. So I'd like to meet with those guys as well.
Very good.
Micronuclear power production and
Yeah.
satellites.
Yeah.
Yeah, micronuclear is going to be a thing.
Is there an Aspen relationship there?
Well, there could be, but more than anything, it's an interest because of it's a green energy, and evidently these micro-nuclear don't have nuclear waste.
Just to follow up for clarity, when I draft an email, send it to Jill, do you guys want to be copied on it? Do you? Does anyone on staff? Or just,
I didn't quite understand fully, we're giving them ideas for what they could do with $100,000?
no. That was just an example of a program that we might have some interest in understanding what they're doing.
Okay.
In addition to the 3 main areas of policy overlap or interest, which are affordable housing, transit, and environment. So they had expressed interest.
So what is the letter then supposed to focus
It
on?
would, from talking to Jill, it would just be sort of a recap of the conversation that we had when I was there, and just saying like, how do we start to do something with this? You know?
Well, I'd like to see a recap of your
I think that's who
conversations.
should see it with the Sister City Committee, because they're the ones who will be doing any of this work or not.
Yeah.
And so you need to make sure you're not,
Well, I'm sending it to Jill first, but I'll copy Ward.
yeah,
Yeah.
to make sure they're not
Anyone else on staff?
volunteering them for more than they can do.
No, this isn't this would qualify under the 2-hour rule.
Okay.
It wouldn't be more than that from staff.
Okay. And then the only other thing, slight update, the psychedelic assisted therapy group, closing in on the number of signatures they need. I don't know if we need a recap, but it's a 3-part framework. So the first part is an effort to sort of create the safe container. So there's 6 months for training, education, harm reduction, sort of all these things. Once that's completed and a report's generated, then there's a decrim that happens for entheogenic plant medicines. And the third step was intended to be a biannual report. What's going on? Is it working and not? And advocacy at the state and federal level. The group's not sure if they're going to hit the deadline for those signatures. They're getting close. The thing that they've become aware of is the state ballot initiative, number 58, is moving forward, and it's looking more and more like it's going to be successful. And so there is some, kind of chatter within the group of, this thing looks like maybe it's pretty likely to pass. And if we miss this deadline by a week or a month or whatever, are we going to be kind of shooting ourselves in the foot as a community in not being prepared for this? So if it happens at a state level, are we in this sort of wild, wild west environment where we haven't done all this important pre-work around education and stuff? And is that good for us or not? So that's kind of the conversation that's happening.
Well, it reminds me of when the state legalized marijuana. It wasn't as if people could automatically open a shop in your town immediatee. They gave grace for towns to make their regulations and rules and everything like that.
Yeah, and I don't know how that works in 58, but just to keep you guys abreast of the conversation, because the group feels strongly that, having that safe, look, there are downsides with the upsides, like any medication or any therapy, and so really having that in place to get the most out of the therapeutic aspects and minimize risk and downside is important.
Well, I saw them out gathering signatures early on when they first said, and I just haven't seen anyone since. I mean, and it's not my issue, but if it was my issue, I would try to make sure I was on the local ballot in case the statewide one failed.
Yeah, and
and rather than just let it go.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal. I do think, this is just my interpretation, I could be wrong because I'm not involved or having these conversations, but it does sound like a combination of, the state sapping some of the energy and a lot of travel of group members as well. I mean, there's a number of them, they're activists, so they're off working in Ukraine or whatever. So, yeah, so it seems like that has slowed the expectation around signature gathering, but they're getting close. So.
Yeah, I think Initiative 58 is really a good initiative, and the presenter and organizer for that was at Here House and did a presentation. And I sensed the same thing, that once it got on the state ballot, that there was a little bit of loss of emphasis and energy by Martha and her group.
Yeah. I will say not by Martha. She's been active, but
Well, her
I think
group.
her group is showing up. Yeah.
And council, we anticipate bringing you a summary of state initiatives, whether you wish to take a position on any of them. I will tell you on 58, we are taking a look at some home rule provisions that are overruled in the current proposed language that do not allow self-determination of some zoning considerations. That we're trying to understand the extent of that impact, which could be a fatal flaw in the ballot.
Yeah. Look forward to see that.
Yeah, I think I remember reading some stuff in there about, they're trying to, at a state level, preventing local municipalities from.
Banning or locating location. That could be a double-edged sword because, I was here when we had the strip club
Heard about
debate
this.
over there at the old Paragon location. And, you can, as a community, say you have to be 1,000 feet away from any schools or childcare facilities or things like that. But if they've stripped away those sort of powers in this legislation.
Unintended.
Yeah,
That's what I heard too.
there you go.
That's all I got.
Just for you guys.
Thank
Right
you.
on. I have only one board to update you all on. Last Thursday, I attended the RAFTA board meeting. Just to go through the agenda real quickly to give you an update on what happened here. There was a small change to the value, the miners stored discount card. It raised by about a quarter to 50 cents in some scenarios. So I think it was a 3.25% reduction in that discount. Again, like I said, it didn't show up very much in the purchase prices, but they did do that just to true up some of their accounting. We did have an executive session, as stated here. There were two issues that we were talking about, personnel matters being one, but also possible acquisition lease for RAFTA affordable housing. Later on, we talked about the RAFTA Climate Action Plan, and they were asking for funding and support for RAFTA really taking an aggressive approach to climate action. Right now, RAFTA, seemingly has so many avenues where they could make environmental progress and inroads, but in order to get closer and better to that issue, they wanted to create a climate action plan. That was approved. We had the same discussion at RAFTA that we had here at our council table, which was dealing with family and medical leave insurance plan, opt in or opt out. We went the same way as the city of Aspen, which was to opt out. Other than that, we did, the one thing that I would bring to this council's attention is I represented us in in that climate action plan. One of the things that I was advocating for was fleet replacement program. We are looking at 14 support vehicles being brought on over the next 18 months at RAFTA, and my question to them was, are we looking at hybrid, electric, and other types of vehicles? We do purchase hybrids as often as possible, but again, it wasn't until this climate action plan kind of gets going until they will really take a deeper look at this.
Got it.
As always, RAFTA is looking for employees. They still identify housing as their number one obstacle to filling those positions. Therefore, we have done some compensation adjustments. I think it was a 5% across the board raise, retroactively effective to July 1st of this year. That is going to be impactful, yet these guys run a great budget down at RAFTA. And one of the things that is helping us is that we were part of the RAISE grants that have been being pushed out. And now the $10.8 million, I believe, to RAFTA, which is great news, but a lot of that will be utilized for the Glenwood Springs projects that are going on. Now, as we all know, if it benefits Glenwood Springs and their infrastructure and RAFTA's operations, it benefits us as well. So there's a lot of hard work, some good news. Again, you know, these guys are really thorough. I think RAFTA does a great job, Dan Blankenship and his leadership, but really his entire team, and that's whether it's facilities maintenance and management, or if that's on our accounting and our financials. These guys are really great. But I will, again, be giving you guys the agenda ahead of our meetings in case there's any items that you want brought forward to RAFTA.
Cool. Gracias.
Thank you.
That's all of it.
Very good.
That is our board updates. And if there's no other business for council members to bring to the table right now, we can adjourn our work session.
You know, let me use this as the opportunity to make this request a little more formally. It doesn't have to be anything immediate or anything like that, but I really do think it'd be great for our community to have a sense of where the various construction projects in our downtown sit in terms of you know, it's hard to say, but I know from talking to Philip, it's not as if we could say, oh, the Main Street Bakery will be completed by this point. But people are continuing to ask, where is it in process, and how much longer the vesting? Oh, they just got this foundation permit, so now it's good for another year or so. And just to take kind of an inventory of where we are with those development projects in the downtown. And from there, we can look to see, are there changes in our processes that could make this better? And the one question I'd ask Jim True to start looking at and thinking about is, well, this whole process where if you know, get this approval, then it's good for another year, and you get this done, it's good for another year, and you can drag a project out for 12 years. Is that our process, or is that a state mandated process? And can we change that process? And are there incentives that we could offer to people for finishing sooner so that, you know, hey, you finished 3 weeks sooner than you thought you were going to, we'll give you a small rebate on the parking fee we had charged you. Or if you exceed the time you said that project would be finished, we can start doubling the parking rate for using the public spaces or something. But just what are the processes we could improve? And so I know I've brought it up before, but it hasn't been a formal request. And so maybe this would be looked at more formally.
Sarah, how close are we to having the ability of compiling some sort of information just on construction schedules?
I think we would be better if we targeted certain properties to start, and we know what those long-time properties are.
In the core, yeah.
Right, rather than trying to swath all. What we're in the process of developing is an interactive GIS map where you can click on a site, know what permits have been issued for it, so that any member of the community can go in and see those timelines, see when entitlements were approved, et cetera. What you're asking for is a little more work than what that is.
Yeah.
So I think Philip and I can talk about it and prepare an info-only memo for you of what those are. I'm not going to commit to a timeline right here.
Yeah,
until
no,
I can talk
I'm
with
not
you.
asking for anything. I mean, I know they just got rid of the STR, the moratorium work. It's something that should be a next step for us to try to say, what else can we do to improve our codes for both the developer and the community that's living with the developments? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's kind of along the lines of that never-ending story on some of these projects.
Sarah?
I just want to advise the council that based upon a few different factors the mayor and I covered today, we'll be moving the Burlingame Child Care Facility to discussion until Monday, the 22nd, and only tomorrow will be short-term rentals.
Okay.
I think that's smart.
Thanks, Sarah.
Good topics.
All right, with that, we're going to call it an evening. Thank you to GrassRoots as always, and we are back here again tomorrow, as Sarah said, 4 o'clock, short-term rentals. Ciao.
All right. See you guys tomorrow.